Hello world. Live from Seattle, Washington, we are Endless Summer. Diving into the news, moves and stories shaping your Seattle sports scene. You've made it to the end of the internet, where the summer never ends. And now, your hosts.
Evan James Audio.
Alex to the Andrew.
We are Endless Summer.
Hey, welcome back to Endless Summer. This week, as always, am joined by Evan to talk about the Seattle Mariners, what they've been up to, how they've been performing. I think we're just about a full month into the season. So our goal this week is to really talk about why the Mariners are better than you expected them to be, and why there's a lot of positives to be drawn from this team, even if they do eventually fall off a cliff, which I do think will happen based off how we've been performing. It's a little unsustainable, but that's that. So welcome to Endless Summer. I'm Alex. I'm joined by Evan, and let's just jump into it.
Yeah, well, I think you have a stat that I want to talk about first pulled up, which was you had the Pythag record and the run differential. Do you still have that up? Will you quote that for me?
Yeah, so our Pythag record is 11-10. We have 94 runs scored, 88 runs allowed. It's the way that that's calculated is runs scored times 1.85 divided by runs scored times 1.83 on all of this, plus runs allowed times 1 to the 1.83. Is that by the power? See, I'm fucking this up already. Can you
In
see
granular
that?
detail, what it's trying to do is it's essentially trying to give you some kind of rough single number for runs scored minus runs allowed with some defensive considerations thrown in as well.
The way that I've had it always explained to me is it says, how lucky is your team? How far above this number are you, and how far below this number are you? So like, if you're a really unlucky team and you get you basically, you're scoring a lot of runs, but they're scoring a lot of runs on you, right? So your record is, you're like 4 games under 500, but your Pythagorean says you should be 10-10 or something like that. That's kind of the thing that it's doing. So right now our record is 13-8. We're 2 wins over. I can do math. On the wins category, I'd say honestly we're like a little lucky, but all in all, statistically, we're right around. That's I would say probably within the margin of error. Obviously, I don't know 100%, but in my opinion, I think we're doing fantastic. I do think there's a potential for us to fall off a cliff. But with that, we are scoring more runs than we're allowing, which ultimately says that we're on the track to, I think, be a 500 team or a little over. At least right now, the trajectory is that.
Definitely agree that they look like a 500 team to me. I think that you can. The one thing I saw was Joe Doyle posted a tweet, which is that 7 of the 9 Mariners that are currently starting, I believe this was 2 days ago now. But basically, 7 out of 9 players on any given day have negative WAR values and are below average offensively, and that feels unsustainable. And so when you look at a record like 13-8, it's definitely still within a sample size range where you can say it's a little fluky, and they've definitely played well enough where you feel like they're, like you said, they're at least a 500 team. They sure look like a mostly 500 team to me. They haven't, they're not a train wreck like we've seen sometimes, so to speak. They definitely are playing sound, competent baseball. Their defense is not excellent, but it is also not, kind of a liability in most cases. So they're mostly fine. The reason that I'm a little skeptical about it is that the good and the bad are the same thing. Being 13-8, you'd feel better about that record in particular if newer, younger players who are less experienced were the ones who were carrying that sort of overperformance, and they're not, which is a little disappointing. And if you're looking at it right now, the only guy you'd really say that about is Ty France, who's batting 320 with a 533 slugging percentage. And so he's out hitting everyone right now. He's out hitting Mitch Haniger. He's out hitting Kyle Seager. I'm looking at the lineup from yesterday because I missed the last 2 games, which is pretty it's uncharacteristic of me. But it looks like Marmolejos was DHing, and so we're kind of at that point in the season where nobody's hitting, and that scares me a little bit. But if you also look and compare the Mariners to other teams in the league right now, there are some entire teams that aren't hitting either. It's early enough where some of the cold bats haven't warmed up, and I want to stay optimistic. And let's roll that into that chart we looked at on Prospect Insider a little bit. That was kind of the the prompt that we wanted to look at for today, which is, reasons to be patient with the Mariners as they underperform a little bit going forward. And I think it's fair to expect that they will. There's been some discussion that they've had the second toughest schedule through today's game or through yesterday's game. That's probably true, but I would still buy overperformance relative to how they've played. I still think they're probably closer to, like a 500 team. But so, are they a little bit better than 500 going forward? It's a real question. So their entire lineup, basically, we talked about only 2 players, 7 out of 9 are underperforming. So only 2 guys are hitting at any given time, it feels like. But also only 2 guys at any given time have more than 500 plate appearances. So tell us about how you think maybe we should be looking at this and evaluating these guys over the course of the next couple weeks and the next couple months.
Well, I think you need to be patient, especially as we continue to tweak our lineup, especially from a defensive perspective. We still do not have a established second baseman. I think defensively, our best second baseman right now is what's his name? Dylan Moore. Sorry, just like shot out of my brain. It was like, I'm gone, bitch.
It's because he hasn't
Moore
played much lately. That's why.
Right, but he is, in my opinion, the best defensive second baseman we have. The problem is that his bat is like literally just a block of ice. Like it just doesn't do anything.
Scott has fully given his playing time over to Sam Haggerty lately.
Yeah, and I do think that's a he's hitting 265. He's right above 250. Like that's a better, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, it is weighted on such few plate appearances, and like he went 3 for 5 yesterday, which probably turns what would otherwise be like a 185 batting average into 260. But yeah, you're right. He has hit, and Dylan Moore has not hit.
Right, and that's the biggest thing. And I look at I look at that. Evan White is actually starting to really climb, and he's working some good at bats, some good plate appearances. So in my opinion, that looks good. And I think, I personally think you're going to see, if anything, Ty France is going to become a perennial DH. He's not going to be, I don't think he has the fielding experience to be a second baseman. If anything, he's a first baseman. Like, I think he's that kind of like build and guy. I don't see him as an infielder, and that could change. Like he could get it. And I hope so, because that would be great. But right now, I mean, you look at it, and our best hitters are, Haniger, France, and Seager. And again, it is such limited plate appearances that I'm a little surprised that Seager's only got an OPS of 760. That seems really low. But whatever.
Yeah, and let's hang on a sec. Let's go to Evan White, because I'm looking at his slash line and I'm seeing some interesting things. 80 points of OBP for Evan White is pretty decent. That's kind of like what I would want to see. Man, that slugging percentage, dude. Woo.
It's not good. 291.
It doesn't jive with anything we know about him. And this has sort of been the book on him really since AA, is that he has these elite exit velocity numbers. He hits the ball harder than, anyone even in the major leagues. He was in, I want to say, like the 5th percentile for most of last year. but it just like doesn't seem to materialize. And I don't, I know that you're a little higher on him lately than I have been, and I like to see that average at least with the 2 in front of it, quite frankly. What do you think about all of this? I'm really torn on what to make of it.
Well, I think you can't drop him from the lineup simply because he's ultimately a Gold Glove first baseman. That being said, I do think ultimately White has the potential to really come out of this because of his exit velos and all of that. I think sometimes he gets really unlucky. If he can just continue to work on the strikeouts, I think he can get it and get it to where it needs to be. It is really challenging to figure out such a to help a player who's, especially when, in my opinion, I think a lot of his, like, when he's either hit into, a double play, he's either hit into, a fly ball that carries just a little too far and doesn't and doesn't bloop in for a single or something, like, or not a fly ball, but you get what I mean. Like, he doesn't get those bloop singles like really you expect to see. And so I think ultimately, given time, he will eventually come up. I don't think he's going to be a slugging. I don't think he's going to be some sort of all-star in that regard, but I think he's, hands down one of the best defensive people you have. And so how do we get that? How do we get the bat to match the defense is really the question there.
He's such a weird archetype of a player because he does what, with the elite exit velocities, with the, the swing choices, whatever it is they want to call it. He seems to have all the raw tools to be an elite starting first baseman, and he has a consistent output of a bench bat. And not a DH bench bat, a first base bench bat specifically. And
Yeah.
it's hard for me to look at this lineup and feel good about the prospects when it goes Mitch Haniger, Ty France, Kyle Seager. I feel great about that. I don't know if I could feel better about that. We're DHing Marmolejos after that, and then it goes Evan White, Taylor Trammell, Luis Torrens, Sam Haggerty, JP Crawford. Ooh. Ooh. And we won yesterday because Sam Haggerty went 3 for 5 with 2 doubles. No, not 2 doubles, with a home run. Okay.
And a stolen base.
And a stolen base. So like we definitely, in order for us to win it all, we need contributions from at least 2 of those guys, and realistically 3. And it's fucking a lot. You know what I mean? Like, especially over time.
Yeah, I'd say the biggest disappointment thus far is Trammell's bat. I expected a lot more. He's kind of been figured out. I do hope he can bounce back because his slugging is insane.
Pretty
It's
decent,
345.
honestly, considering he's batting 155. Not bad at all.
Yeah, it's pretty good. And so like what I hope to see is, that kind of heat up. I'm not particularly, I don't really care to see that Luis Torrens is doing anything in particular. To me, he's always just been a stopgap. I would like to see Tom Murphy's bat heat up a little, but I don't expect a lot there either. It's just a holding place before we can get Cal Raleigh ready.
Mhm.
I think that's a big part of it. I think ultimately, if Trammell can't get it worked out, I think you have to bite the bullet and call up Kelnick.
Yeah, I agree. Give us a date. When do you think this happens? So we're
Mid-May.
425 today. You think mid-May? So you're
I,
thinking 3 weeks?
I think you give it another week to work it out. And we've also faced some really tough lineups, right? Like you said, we have one of the toughest starts um, to the year, and so these are some pretty decent ball clubs. Like, as much as I hate to admit it, the Astros aren't a terrible team. Like all the cheating and everything. Like, you still like those right? Like those garbage can bangs don't mean anything if you still can't hit the fucking ball, even if you know that it's coming. Like you still have to have the skill set there. That's what makes it so frustrating, is that they're a good enough team to like actually accomplish that without cheating. Anywho, but the point still stands that the Red Sox are a good team. Same type of thing. The Dodgers are a really good team, as you can see the way that they kind of attacked Blake Snell last night. Although, to their credit and not Snell's, his mechanics have looked really bad this year. There's a lot of stuff with. There are a lot of good teams that we face. So hopefully we face some crap teams and they can kind of heat up, because it goes without saying, hitting is contagious. Like if you're hitting and the entire ball club is hitting well, everyone seems to do well. And the problem is right now we've got 3 guys who can definitely hit the ball and a collection that can't. I will say I'm impressed with JP Crawford. His slugging needs to come up, but I understand that like his real goal is to I don't care so much. His on base percentage is 307, which actually is pretty good, really, when you think about it. And that's why Marmoleo's DHing isn't the worst idea. His batting average is really terrible, but at the same time, he has a 311 on base percentage, so 187, a 184 batting average, but he gets on base 30% of the time. He like that's actually not bad. So
the main issue that I have, in particular with Jose Marmolejo playing at all, is not really anything against him, because you're right, his bat has been more okay and good than most of the rest of the team. The issue I take with him is the defense is so bad that he's a net negative. Even if he hits pretty good, he has to have a 120 WRC plus to hit or to be positive value.
Right.
This is not that.
No, I don't disagree. I'm just saying that that's a pretty decent on base percentage, and that's what you look for, especially when you talk. So like what I wanted to say though is like JP Crawford getting on base 300 with a 307, like that's not bad. That's actually pretty. I personally would switch this team around a little, and I would put JP Crawford as the leadoff and Mitch Haniger as the number 2. That's my opinion though. But
I don't think they're going to do that. I think they're going to leave JP at the bottom of the lineup until they have, unless they get desperate. I just think so.
Yeah, I don't know if he can get on base and maybe even take that up a few points. It might get him moving even a little more, because Mitch used to hit in the second spot, and while he's decent in the leadoff, like obviously, I just think that with his home runs and his his doubles and Crawford's speed, like might help us break out early in games. So
yeah, it'd be nice to wish on that. I do think the team is past trying to see if JP can be an average hitter and has succumbed to the idea of him just batting whatever he is hitting now, basically, and calling it good and leaving him in the bottom of the lineup. And it feels a little defeatist, but I accept it. And I'm okay with it, given that I'm suspicious this is his last year with the team. I think that barring a swing change and some major uptake in performance, that he's one of the easier players to replace on this lineup with clear upside.
yeah,
Maybe
but
that's a bold thing to say with Marmoleos on the roster, but
I don't know if I necessarily agree though, because I mean, like, and maybe this is the perspective that I come to this with. You just need one run to win a game. You don't need. You need defense to win. Really to win any kind of series, right? So like the biggest thing to me is that I will take defense over the type of, so like I'll put money into pitching. I'll put money into fielding over money into a bat.
yeah, I could see that to some degree. I think though, if you're looking at the culmination of where the Mariners are, majors and minors, that their money is their dollars to cents right now, if they're going to spend on big league players in particular and not minor league players or prospects from other teams, is in the infield, right? Like they need an infielder. And if that guy happens to be, if a shortstop is the one that's available to them, and I'm suspicious of that. We've all talked about Corey Seager, and I would love that. I would love nothing more than for them to extend Kyle and to sign Corey. Um, that sounds wonderful. But if they're not prepped to do that, and they're not in a position where Corey's going to come here, or Correa wants to come here, or one of the other guys is within their price range, I do think they keep JP. But I think that he's probably the most expendable based on a combination of his performance being down and him being more like a 2-WAR player probably overall, and there just being better options available for straight up money. You know what I mean? Like to acquire some better players at some of these other positions, they're probably going to have to trade. And so that requires a prospect investment that I think they can get around by just paying somebody, especially since they're not paying anyone any money. Um, and really, their greatest strength as an organization today, besides the farm system, and maybe even with that included, is that they're not paying anyone. They can afford to spend however much it is they want if they feel so inclined and deck this team out. They're not going to, I don't think, but it wouldn't surprise me if they get one very high priced free agent. Would you agree with that? They're probably going to bring in and pay at least one dude this offseason.
I think maybe. I think, yeah, you might see that. I don't know. I just don't see the point on moving on from a Gold Glove. From your, I guess ultimately I say that like if you're trying to build a team for the future, a team that is sustainable long term, I don't see moving on from your two like defensive standouts from last season. But who knows? This could have been fluke years. I haven't really looked at JP Crawford's stats. In terms of
Hard
from a
time believing
defensive
that his
perspective.
defense is fluky. His defense is rock solid from where I stand. I think you
Right.
agree with that.
And that's my observation too. Same with Evan White. They're both like tremendous defensive players. And so to me, that's the foundation you want to build on over the hot bat.
Well, I guess let me ask you this as a follow-up. So, let's say you could pick someone, not necessarily a free agent, but you're looking to drop a player on this roster. Where do you put somebody? Where do you bring in a spot to upgrade with a clear upgrade? You want it like a +3 WAR at one of these positions. Who are you taking out?
I'm taking out Terrens, taking out our catcher.
Interesting. Elaborate.
I just don't think he's that great of a catcher. I think, I was looking last night. I was watching a little of the Padres Dodgers game, and one thing I notice and like isn't really that frequent is there's a lot less framing going on of pitches, and that's one thing. And like I will sing it till the day is old. I think Mike Zunino is probably one of the best defensive catchers in the league right now. And if his bat was slightly better or he played earlier in his career, in like, if he played in the 2000s, I think he'd possibly, maybe not Hall of Fame, but he'd be considered one of the greats because catchers weren't expected to hit that much. Their job was to manage the pitching staff and make sure that they frame the pitches, right? And focus on that. Mike Zunino could frame literally anything. He was so good at that. And I think that that's a huge thing. And he also was so good at working with the pitching staff. And he would tell Felix like, "Hey, no, you're not pitching that." Like to have that kind of rapport with like Felix, whose ego was like the size of Texas, like that's impressive to come in as like and not a well established at that time too. And I think from my perspective, that's one of the most important things. If you want a good pitching staff, you have to have a good catcher behind the dish. You have to have someone who can command, right? You need a pitcher that can command the strike zone, but you need a catcher that can tell that pitcher where in the strike zone to put it. And I don't feel like we have that right now.
I agree with most of that. And what's interesting about Torrance to me is that he was the darling of spring training in a lot of ways. And I didn't
Mhm.
expect that, and I don't think the team expected it either. But like Shannon in particular really sung his praises all spring. And she's a good mouthpiece for the team, and so she's mentioning that a lot. It's probably something that the team is thinking substantially. And that's backed up by the fact that they DH'd him a bunch at the beginning of the season. I think he fell out of that position by batting 176, but they do seem to, for whatever reason, like his bat more than has ever actually shown up. He did hit for a pretty decent average last season, but again, it was a small sample size, and it was still think he had a negative WRC, or not a negative WRC plus, but below average. Um, because for other factors, maybe it was on base percentage or whatever, but he seems like a more marginal player. The argument in his favor too was that the Padres mismanaged him incredibly badly, and he needed a more stable environment to kind of, do a change of scenery thing and have people believe in him more and not be jerked around so much. I think he spent like a year on the team not playing or something to that effect too because of Rule 5. Um, and so, he just needed a different environment. And I think I'm with you and that I'm not really seeing it, I guess. So my question for you would be, do you feel comfortable going with one of the two of Terrence or Raleigh, or excuse me, Terrence or oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the names, or Murphy. So do you feel confident going with one of Terrence and or Murphy and Cal Raleigh, or would you go get a free agent or trade for somebody?
I don't know where Raleigh is necessarily in his development, and I think that's ultimately the the question there. That being said, I think if you still want Raleigh to develop and really become like, a solid catcher, and a solid, player, I would go out. That's where I would spend my free agent money. That's where I would spend the money to bring someone in. I would bring in a veteran, established catcher to come in and say, "Hey, this is how you're going to manage, and this is how you're going to work with a pitching staff. This is all of that. This is how all of this should function." And then they can work with Raleigh to do that. So you'd still have two catchers. You'd have Raleigh and that free agent. You would then have maybe Raleigh pitch Sundays or something, not pitch, catch Sundays. And with that, you then get the opportunity to have this, career catch is, free agent signing, bona fide established catcher, coach Raleigh in the game, right? And you basically join them at the hip, and when they're on the bench, like they're hopefully chatting and talking about what's going on, so that there's that sharing and that understanding. But yeah, so
I guess we'll
that's
see.
me.
And Raleigh, for the record, looked really good in spring training, looked better than I expected. I think anyone expected. I think he was a pleasant surprise to the team as well. So, my money is kind of on him sooner than later. I could see him coming up with Logan Gilbert at the same time. Um, as a tandem wouldn't surprise me one bit. I think that's sooner than people expected for Raleigh in particular, but I think the team believes in him and they're going to go with him soon. So, um, I think there'll be change of foot there. Let's segue a little bit into. I think we'll close it out with pitching because we haven't talked about pitching at all. Um, the bullpen has kind of been lights out, which is nice to see. It's been a really small sample size, but the bullpen has pitched really well after a rough first week. Um, but I think there's been some more mixed results from the rotation. Flexen was nails yesterday, and my dark horse continues to look like the best pick of the year. Um, Marco and Kikuchi have been a little more up and down. So tell us how you feel about that.
I feel good about Marco. I think that he just had one bad outing. I think also his like 3-4 walks last year was like really that's unsustainable, especially over over a full season, right? Like he was insane last year. So I think Marco, I think he'll be fine. He'll bounce back. He'll do great. I am not impressed with our dear friend Kuchi. I don't know. I just don't know, dude. I don't know what you do.
Yeah, and I think that you're stuck. You gotta let him pitch and hope that you see more good than bad. But It's hard to know what to make of it too, because when I watch him pitch, I feel like he gets, and I have always felt this, and it's hard to know if it's just, inner fan bias sneaking up, but I feel like he gets squeezed in the strike zone as much or more than anyone I have ever seen pitch. And I don't know if it's his stuff. I don't know if it's who he's throwing to. I don't know if umps just don't like him. I don't know what it is, but
I completely agree. I do think that there's a large degree of unluckiness with his pitches. Like he has gotten some like bona fide strikes called as balls, like on the edge, that like I swear to God, if Kershaw pitched it, they would have been like yelling strike louder than like you could ever hear. But Kikuchi pitches it and it's just like, no. And that's frustrating because here's the thing. I completely agree. I think his stuff is really good. I guess it's not that he's not impressing me. I just am like, how long can you let this experiment go on, especially if the league isn't going to respect him? And that's half the issue. Is like, really, you bring up a good point. Like his strike zone is like ridiculously small, and it doesn't make sense, and it's unfair, and it doesn't align to what like you would expect. So of course he's having issues if he has to pitch in like, the eye, and if his entire strike zone is the eye of the needle, he's screwed.
yeah, if he's losing 3 strikeouts a game to a weird zone, he's a different pitcher almost entirely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. So looking at the bullpen, a couple of people have written articles about how Graveman has been one of the better pitchers in all of baseball, one of the better players, period. Like through, I want to say it was only 3 or 4 appearances, he had almost put up a full WAR. It was like 0.6, 0.7. So not just for a relief pitcher, but for players in general, he has been one of the most valuable. So the question is, the Mariners are, let's say they're 500 plus a little bit. Like right now they're what? They're 13-9, so they're 4 games up. Let's say they're 7 games up in August, sometime in August. Do you trade Graveman or do you add to this bullpen and go get the cheapest thing you can add at any given time is the bullpen piece, right? Without digging really into the reserves, you can add a bullpen piece. And you can maybe get one in exchange for someone relatively superfluous on the team, be it a Jake Fraley or maybe Dylan Moore hits and it's Sam Haggerty, maybe vice versa. But what do you think about adding a relief pitcher to this team?
I think it's a good call, especially I think one place that I think we have a setup. We don't have a bona fide closer, in my opinion. I don't know anyone who has the stuff to close a game. Which I think we're getting lucky, but every time it's a different pitcher every time we have to close out a game, which to me is like, that's playing with fire. So I don't know. It'll be interesting. I think I think it really depends on where we are, what 7 games above 500 even looks like. If that's 7 games above 500, but somehow, the A's or even the Astros are like 12 games above 500, then like, are we really in this race? Like, those are the kind of questions to be had. It'll be interesting for sure. I don't know. I don't know what the best option is there.
I had
think
just
it's
considered too, maybe they have Munoz back by then. He was supposed to be back by then anyway, so it's possible we have an internal addition anyway.
Yeah, and I think that's something that we could that's a good point. But yeah, it's consistency, I think, is the biggest thing that I think we miss sometimes, and so it would be nice to have a consistent closer.
It would. I'm watching, the game is about to start, so it's 10:15, 10:16 here on Sunday, and the game is starting early because they're doing, early game in Boston. And we have Moore in right field and Sam Haggerty in left field. So for anyone who ever says that the Mariners can't call up Jared Kelenic, that we don't have a spot for him, we definitely 100% could use an outfielder on this team.
Yeah, we definitely. I think ultimately, I think you gotta. In my opinion, I think Marmoleos is maybe the one to go, especially if his bat can't heat up. I don't know. I really don't know who you necessarily send out given
Trammell, right? We don't want to say it, but the answer, like, unfortunately, the answer is probably they send Trammell down when he
yeah.
can play in AAA.
Yeah, and that's the thing is like, but at the same time, Marmaleos is like, yeah,
You know
batting
what's stupid about
184.
Marmolejos is you want him to back up Evan White, right? Like, in an ideal situation, you
Yeah,
wouldn't say that, but you do kind of want him as a backup first baseman because that's sort of where his bat fits, which is lame.
yeah.
All right, well, let's
And
wrap it up there because they're about to start and we want to watch. No.
yeah, I hope to watch. Yes, depending if my son stays asleep.
Well, I wish you the best of luck on that. I'm gonna kick back here. I got some work to do. I've actually been doing a bunch of other, not on podcasts, but I've been mixing and mastering for several other podcasts as well. Some for Lookout Landing and some other for Pitchers List, I believe, or it's going to be for SB Nation. Then I have a couple other paid jobs as well. So I've been a little bit busy this week and missed out on some games, but I'm excited to watch today.
Me too. Me too. I want to close out Boston with a win. It'll be our first since 2014, and that'll be good. So
Have we lost a series this year? I know we tied a series, I think, but haven't we won all of our series so far?
I think we have, and that's the thing. You want to take 2 out of 3 from basically every series, and you'll I think maybe.
Statistically, you can't lose if you take 2 out of every 3. So,
White Sox, I think, is where we lost one.
oh yeah, I knew that we had a rough patch in there somewhere. It was the White Sox.
It was
right
the
after.
White Sox and the Twins where we had a bit of a rough patch. So
Oh, but we beat Houston, which was nice.
that is most definitely nice. Yeah, it was a bit of a rough start. But I think we've come back. I'm excited to see where we land today. Yeah, Haniger's at bat right now. So hey, thank you for joining us this week. I really appreciate it. You can find me on Twitter at Alex to the Andrew, shit posting about video games, Mariners, baseball, pain, etc. Evan, where can they find you?
EvanJamesAudio.com, Evan James Audio on Twitter, posting about music and sound design stuff, and I'm doing a lot more YouTube lately. I've been recording scripts and doing kind of just practicing editing in Premiere and doing some small video stuff. So that's going to be fun as well. But yeah, that's it for now. So everyone take care.
Hey, thanks for joining us. We'll see you in 2 weeks. See you in 2 weeks. See you in